I'm not saying that the freckles are anything to do with his speed, or if he didn't, maybe he'd be quick. I don't know. Well, I wish him all the best.
Me too, as well. Yeah.
Whatever he's doing, Freckles,
and hopefully we do see him back on a rugby league field because he's 26. Yeah, no. He's got plenty to go, I think.
Oh, God, I mean, to me, there can't be, in my opinion, there can't be 30 better wingers in Super League than he is. Really, if you think about squad depth and stuff, I mean, there can't be. So, yeah. Anyway.
Okay, then into the championship news. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yep, so Kieran Purtill has agreed to remain head coach of Widnes until the end of the 2020 season. 42-year-old arrived at the Vikings ahead of this year and has now signed a one-year contract extension. Purtill, who's handed 6 debuts to academy products this season, has been in charge of the club administration, which saw them docked 12 points. He's celebrating, spoiler alert, celebrating the weekend's result with a new deal. Good on him.
Yeah, definitely. Top credit to him. He hopefully the club can build, and he can be, a big part of that, and hopefully stay full time himself, even though the club isn't. And all the best to him for sure. He deserves it. Featherstone have signed Warrington fullback Jack Johnson for the rest of the season. The 23-year-old has made 18 appearances for the Wolves since making his first team debut back in 2015. Johnson suffered a double leg break in training before the 28 campaign and returned to the field earlier this year, playing 4 games for Warrington.
Yeah, so obviously going to get some games for Featherstone.
Yeah, I think Championship is maybe a level that he could find himself at to rediscover his confidence in his form, certainly. Yeah. But good luck to young Jack Johnson. A couple of other news lines that dropped in today from the Championship. England Students International Jason Bass has signed a new deal with York for the 2020 season. The 23-year-old arrived at the Knights last November after playing more than 60 games for Coventry. Bass has made 21 appearances for York to date, scoring 7 tries from the wing, centre and fullback positions. I think he's a talented and versatile player that's definitely earned a lot of game time at York, so good luck to him. And Halifax have confirmed that QLT Quentin Laulu Tongagai has been released by mutual consent. Laulu Tongagai, who's 34, returned to the Shea in the off-season after a 9-game spell with Super League side Castleford. It's widely expected that he will be joining what they called Newcastle,
right,
in League One. Which I think will be a great signing for them, just for a short-term boost to try and push their promotion chances. So yeah, they're certainly
pushing the boat out, aren't they?
They are. They're really making the moves in the sort of mid to late season push, aren't they? And do you know what? The signings they've made so far have been top notch.
Yeah.
For that side. They've really helped them. So if this goes the same way as, say, Nick Newman has done, then they'll be getting promoted.
Yeah, and so obviously there's a bit of a Coventry theme there. I hear Jason. I mean, I haven't seen Jason Bass, but I hear very good things about him, and the fact his progression is obviously continuing. That's great for him. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And finally, the Rugby Football League has made a loss of £327,000 for the calendar year of 2018. Attributed to the lower crowd at last August's Challenge Cup final. Catalan Dragons' victory over Warrington Wolves was historic for the competition and the sport as the first non-English team to win the final. However, the crowd of 50,672 was the lowest Wembley gate since 1937. They suggested that this year's adopted budget will generate a £207,000 profit. And
hopefully amongst a whole host of handing over fancy gold chains from one person to another person and all the other goings on at the AGM. This is a bad news story in what I think has widely been a good news week for the RFL, with the way that some of the things around the Lions stuff, kit release, has been handled, and also they secured a new sponsor, didn't they? Along the way, that the Checker trade deal, I think that's sort of was announced a week ago. I think we just missed that on last week's show. And there's some other good bits of business that they've been able to do.
Yeah, I mean, little things like I know that it's part of the whole group, but the Valspar sponsorship on the referees' kits this weekend with a kind of the charity element of that, good news story, that kind of stuff. So
the money starting to be distributed from the Rugby League World Cup stuff. There was the new round of announcements for the next clump of that sort of funding that's been given out to the community game and the universities games and that sort of stuff. So that was all good as well, for sure. And Tony Adams has actually brought quite a lot of press coverage this week as well. So I think there's been some good stuff, and there's been some bollocks out of Brian Barwick's mouth that have made up for this big loss that they made last year. That obviously has now been confirmed, as we all expected to be. So hopefully they can make their budget next time around and get back on an even keel, and then start to do better.
Yeah, I mean, I think indications are good. I mean, yeah, as you rightly said, the Lions, all the kind of the social media stuff around the Lions stuff is brilliant, and
there was a coordinated social media approach to it. How with Super League clubs getting involved as well. I thought that was possible.
Yeah, who would have thunk it? But yeah, in terms of we won't have the same situation in terms of the Challenge Cup final, and I would say that this is an acceptance of what went wrong last year, and ultimately you do need to admit these things, because these things
learn from them otherwise.
Of course, and these things are a matter of public record. But yeah, we'll hopefully they're in a better position now than they were last year.
Okay, and talking of things that can help raise money for the RFL, we're going to now move on to the Challenge Cup Day, let's call it, at Bolton. Yeah. So, into the Challenge Cup match reviews then. The wonderful rain-filled day that we spent in Bolton on Saturday, or in Horwich to be more specific. And we're joined by victorious Wire fan Leigh Whitnell for this part of the show. Welcome back to SLP, Leigh.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Scoots.
Look, we'll hear from Scoots later on. I'm sure I know she got a match review in. We'll do the women's final and the two men's semi-finals, but we'll start by touching on the attendance and then the day as a whole, our reflections on the day before we get into the games. And the attendance that was announced for the day was 24,364. I don't know how good a sense I got of the full stadium, because there was a whole tier above my head that I couldn't see. But Alan, I think you were in the upper tier in one of the sides. So 24,000.
Well, not at the same time. I suppose that's the short answer. It's impossible to tell. Really, I'm trying to think when the stadium was at its fullest, and I'm thinking that was probably in the last 20 minutes of the first semi-final.
Yeah.
Because a lot of where I was, there were still some CAS fans around. Some Fax fans had come in around that area. There was a few kind of odds and sods of neutrals and the odd variant shirt around, and that was probably at its fullest, but I wouldn't say at that point there was probably more than 15 in, maybe. I don't know. It's hard to tell, isn't it? Because they said that there were 4,000 in for the women's final, and I think that's ambitious. My guess was about 2 to 3.
I just said 2 to 2.5. Yeah, for the women's final. The CAS fans attended very well for the women's final compared to the Leeds fans. That's got to be said. A good bunch of CAS fans were all together, and there was scattered amounts of CAS fans around the stadium as well. I was particularly impressed by the Hull FC following. That was, I felt, the largest following, given that they travelled the furthest, was very impressive for me. That was from where I was sat and what I could see. I don't know what you guys think. Leigh, you were in amongst the Warrington fans. They had quite a lot of people there as well, and were making quite a lot of noise at the end of that first semi-final.
Yeah. I mean, it felt like it to me. Obviously, looking out at the other side of the stadium, I thought we had it. I thought we had more, but obviously I got the sense of all the noise around me rather than being able to see. But yeah, it didn't feel as full as last year. I don't know what I can't remember what the attendance was last year, but it certainly
the same was the.
Was it roughly the same?
Yeah.
It just there's just something it just didn't it didn't have that same feel of fullness. But
do you think the weather played a big part in it not feeling the same as last year? Because obviously people were probably spending a bit more time in the concourse. Every time I went into the concourse to get a drink, it seemed a lot fuller than it ever felt at many times last year. And I was sat in pretty much the same seat as last year. So a lot of people were ducking and diving from the rain. And of course there was no exit and re-entry policy. And when you've got 3 games, not just the 2 games, that takes away a little bit, because I know I would have wanted to nip out certainly in between the women's game and the first semi-final, to see other people, see other people in the SLP family. I didn't get to say hello to you, for example, Leigh. I didn't get to see Sarah and her guys, which would have been nice to. I don't know how Fat Boy Rob managed to get into 3 different stands during the day. I don't know how he managed it.
He's clearly very persuasive.
I think he was waiting. I think he stood around waiting for Hull fans to cause a bit of ruckus and then dip behind them. Unwatched by the stewards. But yeah, that took a little bit away from the whole experience for me. The weather and the lack of the exit and re-entry. Like, I would want everyone to be in the stadiums for all the games, but I don't think forcing them to be in the stadium for all the games is how you deliver on that, because people couldn't go out for fags, for example. People might want to nip out to go up to the McDonald's or the Tesco's or whatever on the big retail park just behind the stadium, and still watch most of the games and not really miss much of the games. But I think people were choosing to only go in for their game because they knew they couldn't go out after, like, they couldn't watch the women's final, say, then go out and get back in for halfway through the first semi-final if they were Saints fans. Or
I have to say, it felt, obviously having been to Magic and to the Bash and that kind of stuff, it felt different, even though the format was broadly the same.
Do you think it was maybe because, obviously last year, as well as the weather, the Catalan Saints game came first? And certainly from a wire perspective, I was there for the whole of that game, but the crowd built around me during that game, and the excitement built around me as that game didn't turn out the way everybody thought it was going to, and that just whipped everybody up into a frenzy. And then by the time we got to our game, it was I don't know, that certainly was my experience last year.
The first semi-final this year was very close. And the last 20 minutes was quite exciting. It could have gone both ways. I
was still in a frenzy, Mark.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it was just because maybe because we went last last year or something. There was that it felt different for me. But
there was certainly a criticism of, like, last year there was a problem, wasn't there, that they ran out a lot of stuff, and they hadn't learned because they ran out a lot of stuff this year in the concession stands. They didn't have any milk all day for people who wanted a coffee with milk, and it wasn't a super warm day where everyone was on the beers. It was, people were wanting coffees and teas and stuff. So there was issues there but I'm guessing you're going to get that when we have to be at a stadium that is run by people that are in administration.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, sorry, Leigh. There were a couple of issues with, obviously I was up a tier in the West Stand, and there was a couple of issues with the bars. The bars didn't even open until
after kick-off, the first game.
Well, after kick-off in the women's game. It was probably it was probably in the second half by the time they opened. And, there were people that, obviously wanted a beer and whatever, even if it was, 11 o'clock in the morning. It just felt a little bit lacking in atmosphere as you kind of walked in.
Yeah, I definitely got the sense of that, yeah.
But the action on the field was very, very enjoyable. And